Well, there's Guido. So all we need is Tim.
Oh, nice. Did we lose? There's Andrew. Okay.
Lil, is today your birthday?
Tomorrow.
Oh, happy birthday.
Birthday.
Happy birthday.
You thought you were going to
40.
slide on that, right? You
What's
thought
that?
we wouldn't find out, huh?
So you're 39 again?
Yeah, something like that. Actually, it's a big birthday. It's the big old 60.
Right on, baby.
Anne-Marie, it looks like Tim's in the attendees
Yeah, I
panel
just-
also. Yeah,
I
okay.
just
Good.
found him.
Okay.
Are you doing anything big to celebrate it?
Yeah, Marcy and I are flying down to visit my parents tomorrow for a few days.
Oh, nice.
Good.
So
That'd be nice.
that's nice.
Yeah.
I got an email from somebody who's in Palm Beach, and they sent me a picture, and I'm like, of palm trees and sand, and I'm like, I'm jealous,
Yeah, you're dealing with melting snow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
That'll be terrific. How's your mom doing?
Mine, fine. She's fine.
Good.
Yeah, they're both well. I mean, I'll let you know in a couple days. I haven't seen them lately.
If they're back to their usual bickering, they're in good shape. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for asking.
No problem. Tell them hello.
I will.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're all here, Mayor.
Yep. Well, first of all, I want to thank Anne Marie and Ellen Lorraine for all your hard work in putting this together. And we've got a lot of work ahead of us as we try to cut, slice and dice this and come up with a budget that will actually work for the community. Obviously, some things will roll right along very smoothly, and there are others that we'll have to just spend some time discussing. But this is a great template to begin with, and obviously reflects a lot of growth and a lot of changes that are happening in the city. So we all have to go into this with an open mind and also recognizing that we have an obligation here to come up with a budget that really does work going forward. There will be pitfalls, as there always have been in every budget, and we may have to have amendments, but we need to come out of here with a budget that we think we can live with. So, and obviously we're not going to get there today, but over the next several weeks, we will forge one. So anyway, thank you very much. So Ellen Lorraine, Anne Marie, I think we're going to start here with an overview of the whole budget. Is that correct?
Yep. So I've got a PowerPoint I'll show. Before we get started on that, I want to say, I think, Mayor, you're very kind in noting both myself and Ellen Lorraine, but we know who does the real hard work on the budget, and that's Ellen Lorraine. So, so she's really put a lot into this, and she's really good with the math and all the tracking the revenues and tracking the expenditures. So she's really put a lot into this over the last few months. I also want to say before getting started that we did have a request from one of our council members that following today that starting next week, we do our budget meetings in council chambers. And we will be making that change on the agendas starting next week. So we will have the anchor location in council chambers. We will have council chambers open, obviously limited seating, masks required, and the ability to participate by both Zoom and YouTube. So, all right, so here we are, fiscal 23. So, as you know, our budget year starts April 1st. So just some overall kind of 30,000 foot view items. Every year, we include an increase of 5% in health insurance premiums to begin July 1st. If there's no increase, as there has not been in recent years, that would be a savings of $20,000 that we would reflect in a budget amendment. The challenge is that our budget starts April 1st. The state is working between April and July 1st to get their budget. So we don't know that going in. So we typically plan for that increase, and we can back it out if we need to. So staffing changes. And again, I've indicated in here where you can find things. So page 9 in your budget, we did add 1 parking enforcement staff person. So that would allow Dennis to have more flexibility in keeping somebody in the office to handle some of the questions, and also have full coverage out on the street. And then we also have the staffing associated with the transit program, and we'll get into that in a minute, or a couple minutes, I guess. We have in here the implementation of the pay matrix for our, I'd say civilian, but it's really our non-union employees that are not on a contract. So the increases range, and I know Ellen Lorraine and I have met with some of you. Ellen Lorraine has met with some of you. So I think most of you have kind of seen the how this has come together. But the increases for employees range from about 2.5% to 13.5%, with really those higher percentages going for our lower wage earners. We did not include a cost of living increase because of the shift to the matrix. The whole idea of where you get the higher percentage, the pay matrix was developed based off of a starting wage of $16 an hour. So there would not be, under this matrix, any city employee that would earn under $16 an hour. So there are increases that are needed to be able to get people to that threshold, which is where that higher percentage comes from.
And Marie, is that pretty consistent with the other surrounding communities that everybody's paying a base wage of 16?
A lot of them, and Ellen Lorraine, you might have a more solid answer on that because of how you developed the matrix. I do know part of this relates to, we have been having a heck of a time recruiting.
I know that.
So
I just didn't know how we compared to other communities.
Yeah, Ellen Lorraine, do you know if they've done the same thing?
I think just recently, City of Rehoboth has said that they are going to at least $16 an hour for their staff. And
Okay. Thank you.
federal government had mentioned that they were going to $15 an hour at the end of January.
Okay.
One of the areas where we have really, really struggled to recruit in recent years for seasonal positions has been in lifeguards and seasonal maintenance jobs.
Mhm.
And really the state beaches are paying the lifeguards more than any of the towns. So we are seeing all of the towns increasing their seasonal wages. So I don't know if, again, I don't know that everybody's at 16, but everybody's had to come up because our competition is higher. So
Are there, have you thought about other ways for those type of positions like lifeguards and such, where they're seasonal, as you described, like a bonus at the end of the season, for example, that would also encourage retention. So, you have like maybe a specific date that they had to achieve in order to get this lump bonus.
I think that, again, when lifeguards, especially lifeguards in particular, when they are able to look at going to a state park and making 16 plus an hour, if we had a lower rate and had a bonus, I think they're still going to look primarily at the hourly rate. The other thing with staying through the summer, a number of our lifeguards have had to leave because they're going away to college. I think this past year we had a couple that really left before they should have, but what we've talked about is, I say before they should have, before they would have needed to go to college. We talked about in our hiring process, making it clear that this is a commitment for this duration. If they need to leave before that to go back to school, that's one thing, but if they agree to come on as a lifeguard, the expectation is that they stay either till the end of the season or till they have to leave, not necessarily taking 2 weeks off before you go back to school. So I think we've talked about addressing that issue in the hiring process, to be very clear about what our expectations are in terms of time.
I have
This,
may I
oh.
ask you a question about this, please? Do the lifeguards, seasonal employees earn vacation time
They do not. Our seasonals do not earn vacation or sick time.
or sick time? Okay, thank you.
But they can apply for unemployment.
They can or can't.
They
Cannot,
can.
they can.
Right.
And some do. So we show no increases for the police union as the contract expires. This is wrong. It says 3/1. It's 3/31
331.
of 2022. We do begin our negotiation with the union next week. So, and then there's no increase reflected for the senior contractual staff. So if you go to page 2, and ARPA skews this a little bit, so I've tried to kind of show you where that is. The total revenues are at 13,290,120. The general fund revenues are at 9,497,710. Of that 9,500,000, 2 million of that is grants, and of that 2 million grants, 1,765,500 is ARPA. So that gives you a sense of, the ARPA kind of makes things look a lot higher. And what we show in our draft budget is a transfer of $779,910 from prior year reserves. So when we talk about revenue strategies or, where you can look at cutting expenses or whatever, that is the goal there is to chip away at that $779,910, because transferring from our prior year reserves for operations, is not a sustainable budgeting strategy over the long term. So our general fund expenses, again, it's that transfer from prior year reserves that creates balance, but the general fund expenses match the revenue at $9,497,710, and again includes the ARPA expense of the 1.7 million. So if you take ARPA out of it, the general fund would be $7,732,210.
So in this budget, you have anticipated that we would spend all of the ARPA money in this fiscal year?
So what we've done is it's really more, we're showing the revenue and the expense so that it nets it out.
Okay, all right.
And that it controls for any illusion that we have all this extra revenue that we haven't budgeted an expense for. But we do need to really talk about ARPA.
Oh, no, we have to get there. I was
Did you have
telling,
anything to add, Ellen Lorraine?
No, the figure that I came up for ARPA was a carryover of unspent ARPA money from the current fiscal year, plus what we will receive in our second tranche.
Right.
in June.
Okay.
I was on a conference call yesterday with Secretary Geisenberger, and he made it very clear that at this point, there is no plan to extend the ARPA expenditure of funds, meaning that ARPA monies must be obligated by 24 and spent by 26.
Oh,
So, and he made a similar comment to what I have made in the past, that I don't think there's enough engineering and construction people in the state or in the country to really spend the amount of money that ARPA represents. You know,
so it's a use or lose?
Yes.
right now it is, yep. Now, Congress could change all of that in, with a vote, but right now it's still 24 obligation, 26 expenditure.
Okay.
In your conversation, Ted, did you learn when the state expects to disperse with their large sum of money that they were granted by the feds under ARPA?
They have a
Do we
budget.
not-
The governor's budget anticipates how all of those monies will be spent. They still need legislative approval. So it'll go through the budget process at the state level.
Okay,
They have anticipated what agents or what departments within the state government, whether it's 25 million or 50 million or whatever, will get various things. Now, obviously, that's not down into the nitty gritty of it, but they have assigned how all that money gets expended.
but we don't have anticipation or no reason to anticipate that additional dollars would be coming to us from the state. Is that correct?
Now,
They're going to fund their own agencies.
yeah,
Yeah, some of it may be available through grants. I think they
Exactly.
are putting some of it into like sewer and water grants or
Well, there's
clean
a-
water grants.
and there is a lot of money, which I hope that our friends at BPW are paying attention to, because, and I'll try to get that, the presentation, the PowerPoint that Secretary Geisenberg offered yesterday for you all, but there's a lot of money set aside for improving clean water and lead pipe removal and other things.
Right.
So Anne Marie's absolutely right. There will be grant opportunities, but as I listened, it was not, related to, city, the kinds of things that we would be involved in. It was more related to things that the BPW would be involved in.
Right, and then, I mean, I think some of it'll go to housing programs,
Right.
Dealing with homelessness, that kind of stuff that, again, benefit the community at large, but are not things that we would take part in directly.
Right.
But we need to keep in mind that that's the governor's budget. As Ted accurately said, it still has to get legislative approval. And if there are priorities, specific ones that we think we could benefit from, this is, we have an opportunity through our representatives to try to change that process. I mean, I don't ever recall a governor's or president's budget ever being adopted, really. I mean, it gets pretty much changed enormously based on others' priorities. So, but if I'm not mistaken, it is Delaware got $1.3 billion in ARPA funding. The state has $1 billion of that, and the other 300 million was distributed to the counties and municipalities. So they have essentially, almost a 20-25% boost from their normal budget. So I think if we have ideas, we'll have an opportunity.
Keep in mind that the governor is using a lot of this for one-time expenditures, and nothing that's going to require ongoing funding. So there's a new, for instance, there's like $50 million in the budget for a new hospital for the chronically ill. And other things like that. So these are facilities that are dated. There's quite a bit of information for, other things having to do with those things that they can build, and it's a state-of-the-art thing and move away from. So, and it doesn't require, an ongoing budget to maintain.
On that note, Mark Schaefer has mentioned that Sussex County also has a similar
Right.
program based on that they're going to be distributing, I think, roughly a maximum of $500,000 to various municipalities. Some are going to get much, much less. But that's, and again, that would be a one-off spending priority.
Right, and that is transfer tax funds. And so it would have to be expended for things that are transfer tax related. So that could be capital projects. It could be it could be public safety related things.
Right.
So that proposal is scheduled for public hearing on March 1st. So we've been watching that, and we have not accounted for those funds
Ask you
in
that.
this budget. However, just as in the general fund, our budget reflects utilizing prior year reserves, the capital accounts also include utilizing prior year reserves. So we could use that $500,000 to offset some of the capital reserves that would be utilized.
Yeah.
So
Would it
That's
be-
good to know.
Yeah,
Would it be that we'd get 500,000, but I think it's $500,000 total, isn't it, Julio?
Yes, total.
Yeah,
yes,
Yeah.
and the way it would work, we would be eligible for 500,000. The first 100,000 is not, you're not required to match, but the remainder
you have to match.
is a dollar for dollar match. But
Yeah.
again, when you look at our capital projects, it's not going to be hard to get.
No, that's an easy task to get to, or an easy milestone to get to.
Right. Yeah.
So if you go to page 7 of the budget, the maintenance department budget is $1,069,840. That's a total increase of 10.42%. That is largely related to increasing the minimum starting rate of 16 an hour. So this is the department that has that's most affected by that, because this is the only department that has year-round staff that are currently under 16 an hour. We also have an increase in supplies and equipment based on the need for a 4-post vehicle lift in the garage. And that's for our vehicle maintenance. The police department is on page 8. The total budget there is $1,681,455. That includes that is an increase of 1.3%. It includes the payment for the police staffing study. The 1.3% increase is largely because we have not included the pay increases for the union employees. So this will need to be accomplished through a budget amendment once we have a negotiated contract.
Unless we do it before we adopt the budget.
Oh, right. So we can hope, but
Yeah.
we're starting a little later than we had hoped to. So.
Right.
Parking enforcement and beach patrol. Parking enforcement, it's a total budget of $224,540. That's an increase of 19%. That includes 1 additional parking enforcement staff member and the wage increase to 16 an hour. So that's really where that increase is coming from.
Anne
And
Marie, on that costing, because I know some of these seasonal folks go take unemployment in the off season. The city picks some of that expense up. Has that been
The city picks
budgeted?
the entire expense up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's my point is, so if we're talking about hiring another staff member, is that also budgeted in here? The unemployment aspect?
Yes, we do budget for unemployment in that department.
And can you talk about, again, you talked about this person being more of an office or customer service person. Can you explain sort of what the role will entail?
So this person will need to be familiar with the parking rules, and they could be looking at citations that people have received that are now they're disputing. And they have to be familiar with that. May also need to be called on to do some enforcement out in the field, should that need arise. I know we've been looking at parking along Cedar and those side streets, and depending upon the timeline of when that occurs, this additional person may need to be used in that area as well.
I have a question. Is it possible that the parking personnel, parking enforcement personnel, that their scope could be broadened from just enforcement to also facilitating parking?
I think in order to do that, we would be looking at additional personnel. Would you agree, Ellen Lorraine?
How many people are present in the staff, please?
What was that question?
Total number of
How
staff.
many? Yeah, how many people are on the staff now?
This, including this person, we would have 8 officers and a supervisor.
So 8 officers and a supervisor, 1 super. And is that 8, the count of 8, does that include this proposed new hire?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And do all 8 people work? They don't all work on each day, correct? They have.
No, that's how we're able to have 7-day coverage.
Right.
By,
And they're working more shifts.
pardon me?
They do work shifts.
Right.
8-hour shifts, right? Okay.
So again, the beach patrol, total budget of $111,300. That's an increase of 59.68%. And that is largely the $16 an hour. We have not, one of the things that was requested, and Janet's on, well, I guess when we get into the day that the individual department is scheduled, Janet can speak to this more, but she is here if there's an immediate question. But we have not included in this expanding the number of personnel to expand the guarded beach. So if that is something we want to do, that is, I think Janet's prepared to talk about that on the day that we get to the beach patrol budget. But if that's something that were to be done, it would need to be in addition to the existing budget.
And that's a request that came out of your parking committee meeting.
It actually, before that, came out of a couple of members of council.
Okay.
So. So the next one on page 9 is the city transit program, the Lewis line, which, as I think you all know, would be a new program. This is a total budget of $130,455. And that would include 8 drivers that, again, would be on a schedule, so not everybody works every day. Uniforms, the promotional materials, the preparation of the vehicles, and the vehicle maintenance. So that's where that is. I think you all know there's no out-of-pocket cost, $1 per vehicle for the lease. But there is an operation component to it. And we can talk about that when we're finished going through the.
When you talk about, and we can get into this when we talk about the Lewis line, to what extent are we responsible for maintenance? I mean, if the engine blows up, is that our problem? Or would
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And the other thing, I guess to test, we can get the deeper into it, but have we thought about funding sources outside of the city's coffers for this?
We tried.
Mhm.
So I talked to Senator Lopez. He looked into whether we could use CTF. He confirmed with Delta we are not able to use CTF. I reached out to Shantae Hastings, and she forwarded my inquiry to John Sisson with the Delaware Transit Corporation, and he said that they do not have grant funds available, but did note that, you know, by them providing us the buses, that, you know, is a significant capital cost reduction. So I have not been able to identify any sources of funding.
Does this budget include insurance?
It does. It's not in the 130, but
Okay,
it's in the operating. It's reflected in the operating line.
okay.
I mean, this might be worth working with Betsy in the chamber to see what appetite there might be for advertisement or other revenue streams.
Well,
Yeah.
we intend to do that, you know, to move, but we didn't include the, that aspect of it, but it's something we're gonna look into, Andrew.
Right.
Okay.
And there is an offset, you know, there's an associated revenue that we have budgeted at about, was it 20,000?
Right.
8,000. Yeah.
So, but we do know, I mean, it's well known in any, you know, transit world that transit never pays for itself. There's always an out-of-pocket cost.
Are these buses available on a multi-year contract, or are they just a year at a time?
No, it's a 3-year
It's a
lease.
3-year, okay, great, thank you.
And our guys went, Rick Melendez, Kenny Morris, and Chris Cheney went and actually looked at the actual buses that we would be getting.
Okay,
Where would they be stored in the off hours?
We would park them at the Schley Avenue lot in the off hours.
Did everyone pick up,
Display park,
did everyone pick up the
Display-
package on that? To have the pictures and everything?
yeah,
Okay.
we'll get to that when we get to the presentation.
I just wondered if you did.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
So the city manager's office, there's a total budget of $400,975. Is that a decrease on Lorraine, or is that a typo?
I thought that's an increase.
I thought it was an increase of 4%, but
Oh, I was gonna say, what's the decrease?
Yep.
it's an increase. It's an
It's an
increase.
increase. Okay, I was gonna
Sorry.
say.
Yeah.
So that does include the cost of the second year of the local government management fellowship, that we do have revenue associated with the payment from Milford to share that. And then, so last year, so there's an increase associated with that because last year, Melody didn't start until June, which was several months into the fiscal year. So this includes the full year. And this doesn't include putting all of the staff except for me into the salary matrix.
She with us for the entire year?
Yes.
And notice the health insurance is a significant bump in it. Are we picking it? Is that because of her?
No, I think there were other changes in employee coverage levels.
Okay. All right.
That if you have specific questions, we can talk about that offline.
Yeah, okay, fine.
I don't want to get into.
Yeah, I get that. I wouldn't get into personnel. It's just that, you know, it's such a significant change. Okay, thank you.
The finance department, total budget of $497,700, increase of 2.62%. And the MCSJ training for all staff, that's our admins. That's the We use it, it's our accounting software, we do our building permits and that. And we believe with added training for our staff, we can get more efficiency and value out of using it.
We've had some staffing turnover in the city, and so I thought giving every employee an opportunity to learn more about the program would help efficiencies in every department.
Parks and Marina Administrator, and then the Marina itself. The Parks and Marina Administrator budget is on page 12. That's a total budget of $68,030. It's an increase of 4.73%. The Marina budget is $113,600, and that's a total increase of 19%. This includes $20,000 for repair of the gangway at City Dock. So that accounts for that, and the minimum pay rate of $16 affect that budget. The Parks and Recreation Commission, the total budget of $464,900. That's a total increase of almost 49%. But really the increases relate to the Great Marsh Park Master Plan, repairs to the pavilion at George H.P. Smith Park, on the one on the island, and then repairs to the gazebo at Mary Bussel's Park. So there are some expenses that have caused that. So those aren't, I would look at that as kind of a blip of a 1 year up, and then it should come down in the following year.
And can I just add to the Parks and Rec that there have been budgeted items for Savannah Beach and Johnny Walker Beach.
Thank you. Good point. Which we have not done that before.
Is that included in the total increase?
Yes.
Yeah. And again, all of that is on page 15 of your budget. Janet, I know, is prepared to go through that in great detail when we get to that day. The building officials office and the planning and community development. The building officials office is on page 13, a total budget of $346,170. That's a decrease of 5%. Part of that is related to a retirement where backfilling the retired position resulted in a savings. Planning and community development, page 14, a total budget of $175,800. That's about a 40% increase. We can talk about some of that in executive session, but the other thing is that includes the consulting services for the 5-year review of the comprehensive plan. Other budgets. So there's no change to mayor and city council, byways, assessment, election, and the African American Heritage Commission. The planning commission is on page 16. There's a decrease of 31.19%. And that is based on reducing consulting from 25,000 to 15,000. This year, they have not used any of the consulting funds, but there was a sense on the part of the commission and on the part of city council that consulting funds be allocated in case something comes up where they need to engage a consultant.
We can still have a discussion on this, right?
Oh, yeah, we'll have a discussion. All of these different budgets are scheduled for a future date to get into more detail.
Thank you.
So this is kind of the overview of the whole budget.
Okay.
H Park, we have a reduction in H Park because the survey of the historic district is complete, and that was a $15,000 a year expense.
Mhm.
The Bike Ped Advisory Committee, that has an increase, and that's associated with the low stress bike route, which is a match to a state grant. The Public Art Committee has an increase of $250. So, I mean, that's, relatively minor. The mitigation team has a decrease of 25% or 5,000, and that's based on we've been doing for the Phragmites management, we've been doing the cutting in-house, and we've been able to save money that way. We budgeted, and you'll see it later. We've budgeted to purchase some of the equipment that we've rented in the past, because now that we realize we are going to be doing this on a regular basis, it makes sense to have the equipment. So we'll talk about that later. And then the operating budget, the total of the operating budget, and that's where we have, our citywide software, our insurance, our trash pickup, legal, it's page 20 and 21. So that, there's a lot in there.
And Marie, on this one, I had asked before the end of the year about RFPs for our professional services. So particularly legal and engineering, are they close to being able to go out?
We can talk about that in a separate meeting. So we've been talking to Press in Austin about engineering services. And if we're going to do, we might need to put this issue on an agenda, because I think there's concern that if we were to go for an RFP for engineering services and BPW doesn't, and we no longer are using the same consultant, there's an increase in cost that would be associated with that. And there's concern of, and at this point,
I think it'd be useful even for them to understand what they're getting for their services, just to articulate that and have other firms articulate their services against that.
Right, but at this point, the board has not expressed interest in.
Well, I'm expressing our interest in doing it. That's that, and it, I think I made that clear that, for these services that represent such large line items for us, that it's responsible during this time of year to see what we're getting and or what else might be out there for us.
Yeah.
So typically the things would be done at the organization meeting. So we have until May. I don't know that it would make a big difference in the things that are budgeted, because we need to budget something anyway. And there are some things where we're already under contract for, the scope of a project. But I think, so some of the feedback I've gotten, we can do it, but I don't know that there's, based on some of the feedback I've gotten, at one point I thought that there was a general consensus among council. I'm not hearing that at the moment, so we might need to put it on an agenda if we're going to do that.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Please put it on for February's agenda. Then.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, I think one of the things that happened was that we did bring it up to Austin and Press, and it was absolutely non-receptive. They were both non-receptive to the idea, recognizing that GMB in particular has served the city and the board, and we've been through a split engineering service in the past, and it turned out to be very expensive. And the thought was, and we can get into this in terms of how much longer is the senior management of the engineering firm going to continue before they retire, and is there a better time to do that? So there's a lot of other elements to this, but we can certainly talk about it. Okay.
All right.
So The increases we have here relate to largely bank charges, insurance, software support, legal, and consulting being engineering.
Okay, can we talk about insurance for a minute?
Mhm.
Just so everybody's on the same page. As you know, we've been participating in the workers' comp policy through the DFIT, and we are about to have a windfall from prior year excess premium. It will be a once, DFIT has about an extra $1 million that they are planning, that will be discussed next week. It'll go before the DFIT board later in February for consideration. But there's a total of $1 million that will be distributed to the membership. Our portion, I don't know what that is, would come to us in this fiscal year.
Okay, so we will,
We'll have a windfall.
Good.
so Ellen Lorraine, if you can reach out to Terry, we can try to reflect that in as well. So then moving out of the general fund into municipal street aid, we have, we've budgeted $197,000. And again, this is page 23 of the budget. We've got a tractor for the maintenance department. They use that both for maintenance of the beach and also they use it for some of our street maintenance work as well. Sidewalk and crosswalk repairs and the parking lot lighting project. So typically, unless there's an increase, but I don't believe the governor's proposed an increase, we would anticipate that we would get from the state $116,250.
Right.
So this is one where we would go into reserves, but MSA is one where there's not a good reason to keep much in terms of reserves. So spending down that reserve is actually a good thing, because if at some point in the future, the state starts to make the argument that they can cut it, it doesn't help us to have it in reserves, because we do need the money.
I don't think there'll be any cuts in the state budget. On the sidewalk issue, I'd just like to talk for a minute about the sidewalk along East Savannah is in very horrible condition in front of the Beacon Motel. It's been like that for many years. I really think, and this is an expense that goes back to the owner of the property, I think we need to anticipate that we're going to make that repair. There's a chunk of sidewalk there that is completely missing.
So Charlie and I have been working on putting together a sidewalk program where we would go out and do, you know, a lot of high priority areas, and then, like you said, bill it back. So I anticipate that we will bring something forward when we talk about capital projects, but again, recognizing that there's revenue associated, and this is one of those areas that
What you've put in this budget is only the grinding of sidewalks, not an anticipated actual,
right.
You know,
It's not budgeted. It's not budgeted, so we'll have to budget the expense and the revenue.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me add just on the municipal street aid that I know that the Delaware Association of Towns, this is, if not their top priority to get an increase, but one of the top priorities.
Exactly.
So that number could go up.
It could, yeah.
Right.
Well, and you see that what we have already in cash in this MSA budget is $305,000 at the bottom of page 23.
Right.
So we've got plenty of money there to move ahead with this kind of stuff.
Right. So then our general capital project fund, you'll recall this is the fund that really does not have a steady stream of income coming to it. We did make a transfer out of the general fund for that, for this year, for that large expense building or large revenue building permit for the lodge. the net of the permit fee minus the contractual expense for performing the inspection services. So we did move money into that in this current fiscal year. But again, this is a capital account that does not have a steady stream of income.
Yeah.
So we've got trash truck leases for 4 trucks. I think for the Peterbilt, is this the last year, Ellen Lorraine?
I believe so. Let me just check. 24 will be the last year.
Okay, so we've got 2 more years on this. We've got 30,000 for police vehicles, fleet leasing for the EV for the parking enforcement program, and we have 6 RAV4s, and that's a lease payment of about 30,000 a year. The way the lease program works, we actually, when we traded in some vehicles earlier this year, and they sold them, and they actually got good amounts of money for them. What they get offsets what we pay. So our lease payment has been lower than budgeted for this current fiscal year because of the vehicles we turned in. So the transfer tax fund, you can see on page 26, for the general transfer tax, we've got 1.7 million budgeted, but then when you add in the transfer tax for transfers of over 3 million and the building tax portion, that brings it to about $2 million that we anticipate. So we've got a lot budgeted here. So this is one where, you'll see that it exceeds what we're coming in. We've got Adams Avenue, Railroad Avenue. We've got about $70,000 left in completion of phase 25, which is the current fiscal year. So that, while it's an expense in the next fiscal year, it's also money that was budgeted for this fiscal year that won't be spent. 4th Street and Marina Drive, and it's not the entirety of 4th Street. We'll get into more detail at the capital project meeting, and Charlie did talk about the limits of it at the last one as well, is budgeted at 140,000. Beach parking lot lights budgeted at 300,000. Finishing up the police department renovations is just under 100,000. The tennis courts, we do have the bid. I think everybody remembers that we were supposed to do it this past summer, and there was a delay in the materials. So it has to be done during warm weather. So that is now deferred to next summer. So we've got a 73,500 in a grant, and then the city's portion of that is 82,950. Otis Smith and Schley Avenue parking lots. You've seen that in the capital projects. We talked about the Canal Front Park improvements, city dock improvements, the Blockhouse Pond gazebo, George H.P. Smith Park Phase 2. Again, that's matched with grant funding and carried forward from the current fiscal year. Wayfinding implementation is carried forward from the current fiscal year. The Phragmites maintenance equipment. Again, this is purchasing the equipment we need to go in and cut the Phragmites, and then engineering that's associated with specific projects that are in this capital project list comes to 60,000. And all of that is detailed on page 26. You've got the budget up top, but then you've got the individual projects shown below.
Mm-hmm.
So items not included, really anything for the Schley Avenue garage building. And I did talk to Rick about that yesterday. There are things that need to be done to that, but the problem that we have is that it is beyond its useful life. So really any money you put into it becomes problematic. So what Rick did talk about was maybe taking down a portion of the building. And so I think we need to look with Morgan Helfrich about what are the realistic options, because they do need the garage portion where, we have the lift and, we work on cars. I think there's a general consensus that they don't need the rest. So is there a way to do something that is not high cost, that is not, spending more on the building than it's worth, especially given that we're looking at, hopefully new space in the coming years. So
Yeah.
they've asked repeatedly for a lean-to at the maintenance shop. So that could be part of something we do there. Beach parking implementation is not included in here. Electric vehicle charging stations and police body cameras. And I think we're hopeful that police body cameras will have state funding associated with it, but we can talk about that when we get into the police budget.
State or federal.
Pardon?
State or federal funding.
Or federal, right. But even the federal funds come through the state, so.
Right.
Personnel, there have been several positions suggested. The need to have somebody to work on communications, an entry-level planner. There's a lot of ordinance update work in addition to site plan subdivisions and those types of projects. So it really is, we got to this before where we actually did add a planner position. That person did not stay long and we ended up not filling it, but I think we're kind of at that spillover point again where we've got too much going for one person. We have talked about the need for an IT person. And then I say finance, and I have a question about it. Some of this, there are some things related to existing personnel that will be discussed in executive session. And that, I think we can talk more about the finance need after we have that discussion so that we get some of the kind of backstory stuff. One thing that we did not include in this, but we are prepared to discuss during the meetings is as a possible cost reduction, if we shift from our current deferred compensation retirement to the state municipal employee pension plan, there is a savings of $62,000. Now that is if we make that shift and do not buy any time in for our existing employees. If you start going to buying time in, that increases. But if we go to the municipal employee pension plan administered by the state, there is a savings of that.
Yeah, that is certainly worth considering.
Right.
Given the fact that we've been down this road before. We're currently in the benefit plan we're offering that we're paying 10%. And the state plan would be in terms of long-term, probably better for our employees overall.
So possible revenue sources, just so you kind of have a framework. Each penny increase in the tax, the property tax, would generate about $47,500, and council has not increased the property tax rate since 2011. So that's something for you to think about. The average residential tax bill would increase $14 with a 1 cent increase. So that's one option. Parking meter rate.
Emery, quick question. The tax increase in 2011, was that 3 cents?
Oh, right.
I believe so.
That's what I recall was 3 cents. Okay.
I believe.
The parking meter rate, it was last increased downtown in 2014 and at the beach lots in 2017. If you did a 25 cent per hour increase overall for both, it's $90,000 in revenue. And then building permits, one of the things we talked about at the finance committee last week, and they actually made this recommendation, was for building permits. Our fee is currently based on a dollar amount per square footage, which means it's not indexed in any way. Most municipalities have their fee based on the cost of the construction. So the recommendation from the finance committee was to shift to a fee based on the construction cost. And Ellen Lorraine has been doing some legwork on that, and we will be prepared to discuss that at a future meeting. The current revenue projection is based on the current way that we've been doing it, because again, there's some there's more work that needs to go into figuring that part out.
The last increase was 8 cents.
Was it 8 cents? Thank you.
8 cents. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
So, you know, we will be able to talk about how shifting that permit, the building permit fee, just how it's calculated, what that would mean in terms of revenue. And that is the presentation we have. So I know that Ellen Lorraine put in each of your boxes the material for the Lewis line.
Also posted on our website.
Pardon me?
Posted on our website on the agenda.
Okay, and so it's also, so we can kind of go through that, because that is something that we've been working on, and certainly does have a budgetary component. I'll pull it up off the agenda.
Thank you, Anne Marie and Ellen Lorraine. Good overview. At least we have a baseline of where we're starting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so who wants to talk through this? Ellen Lorraine, were you going to talk through it, or did Carolyn or Khalil want to do it?
I got it.
Okay.
Okay, well, it was all put in your boxes last night. And I think I've talked to you a couple of times about this. The team put together was Khalil and Anne Marie and Ellen Lorraine, myself. And we have had support from the administrative part of the city and the facilities group. And we've done everything from visited Bethany to talk to them. So the bottom line is that, given some time ago when I was running for office, I said something about we're never going to be able to have enough parking spaces, but we have to figure out how to move people around. Well, we've come to that point. You know, I think we started this in November, and we've come to that point where we figured out how we can move people around. And through the success of working through a lot of things, Khalil working through one aspect, and Anne Marie and Ellen Lorraine, we have come up with what we consider to be a very good transit program. So short of reading it for you, the bottom line is that we're probably going to have 4 or 5 buses. And the beauty of that is we're only going to be paying maybe a dollar per bus, not maybe, it's going to be $1 per bus that's been given to us. It's going to run from the ferry straight up to Cape Henlopen. Khalil has negotiated getting some spaces for us up at Cape Henlopen. We have talked to people at the library who are going to also allow us to drop off. So if you look at the schedule of where we're going to be doing and how we're going to start it, it's 9 to 8. It's 2 buses, And remember, this is a pilot, so we're going to run through it and figure out where we need to fix things. But the bottom line is that we've come up with the cost that I think Anne Marie showed you before of what it's going to cost us. This is not a money-making thing. It is a definitely purpose is to alleviate parking and to get rid of some traffic congestion. In the merchants that we've talked to, a lot of them are on board with this, very excited about it, as are folks that we've discussed this with. So any questions about it? Why don't you hit me with it so that I can try to answer anything you don't know? But the package is pretty self-explanatory.
Carolyn, thank you. This is a very good laid out proposal. The one thing that I would just say off the top of my head, in your hours of operation, you might want to consider running the end of the service to 9 p.m. If you end at 8, you're cutting into the dinner hour. And if you're trying to encourage people to use it for dining, they park at the Lewis Transit Center and they want to come down. I mean, if you talk to the restaurants, I think you'll find that most people want to dine at like 6:30 or 7. They're not going to be done by 8 o'clock. And so you might want to consider, adding, an extra hour there.
Okay, thanks.
I have a couple questions.
Go.
Carolyn, Khalil.
Your voice really breaks up.
You're really cracking up there, Tim.
You crack up too much. You can't hear you too clearly.
Okay.
That's not any better.
All right.
No.
Jump out and jump back. I don't know how. I'll do that. I'll come back to you.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Anyone else? This is very well put together, Ellen Lorraine. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, did a great job.
You did a great job. You're in every aspect. I can't thank you enough for your energies. And Anne Marie, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that you're talking to individuals and Khalil talking to various folks made this come to fruition, and I appreciate that.
Teamwork.
Oh, yes, this is definitely a team project from beginning to end.
All right. Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better.
Much better.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I don't know what's causing that, but anyway, I'm glad it's better. Yeah, my first question is regarding the use of the parking lots at the Trailhead and the Lewis Library. Do I understand that there's been some discussions with the library folks to.
Well, not in terms of using their parking lot. No, it's just a drop-off spot. The library is just a drop-off spot.
Walk there. We're not advertising that as a place to park your car.
No, The only place we're advertising to drop your car is at Cape Henlopen and the ferry.
So in other words, if you happen to be at the library, on that campus there, and if you wanted to catch the bus, you would not be able to get on the bus?
No, that's not what I'm saying. You can't park your car there, but let's say you're at the library, or let's say you're walking around, or let's say you have your bicycle, you leave your bike there and the bus comes and you get on the bus.
Or let's say you live on Monroe Avenue or Manila and you want to walk over.
Right.
Sure. I get that part, but there's also nothing to prevent a person to drive to that location, park their car,
Right,
with the purpose of getting on the bus to be able to ride it to the beach, ride it to downtown, wherever they want to go, correct?
Absolutely. There's nothing we can.
Okay. All right. I think
if we see a lot of that behavior, that will be a concern for the library. So we will have to, I think our marketing materials will specifically encourage people to park at the ferry.
Right.
Or it just like you don't want somebody to park an 1812 parking lot and leave their car there all day. So I think that from a messaging standpoint, we need to, if somebody to encourage people, if they want to park all day, really the preferred location is the park or the high school.
Mhm.
Right.
You know,
Well,
I view
okay,
the parking, yeah, the parking at the ferry, you know, I think a lot of that's going to be traffic coming over from Cape May,
Right.
you know, as well. I mean, you know, the idea is people coming from Route 1 outside of Lewis, it's obviously more convenient for them to stop at the Cape and Lopin High School and park there. But having two different options, I think, you know, provide some flexibility.
all right. Well, we'll talk about that in greater detail another time. Let's talk about, have there been any projections on the cost per mile for operating these buses?
I have not looked at those costs as of yet, just the
Okay.
departmental budget and the insurance and the fuel.
Okay, that would be helpful to have. I understand that there's a what would appear to be an attractive, I think it's a lease agreement, $1 a year or something like that to lease the buses. And you also mentioned that that Rick and some of his people went to look at the buses. Did they take any kind of equipment with them to evaluate how mechanically sound these buses are? What kind of repairs are going to need to be able to bring them up to operational standards?
They didn't take any equipment with them, and they're currently, the state has a very rigorous maintenance program for their transit vehicles. So they have been very well maintained, and there is the only maintenance that's going to be required before we are able to use them is really to do whatever lettering or wrapping needs to be done to make them a Lewis transit vehicle versus a DART vehicle that they painted latex over their labels. So there's no, and they, you know, they met with the techs to talk specifically about the maintenance and what's needed. Chris Cheney, who does service on a lot of our vehicles, indicated he was very comfortable with what, you know, they've done to maintain them and what would need to be done, and recognizing that some maintenance would require taking it out and you know, having it serviced at the Ford dealer.
So in other words, are you saying, so that kind of maintenance would not be done in-house, it would have to be done by an outside garage?
It depends on what it is. If, you know, if it's oil change, you know, those type,
yeah, windshield wipers, we can take care of that, but anything mechanical, do we have the ability to do that? Do we have a lift to be able to service these kinds of a bus?
We have a lift, and one of the budget items is the 4-post lift.
Right, but we don't have that right now, right?
Yeah.
We've got a 2-post lift.
Yeah, we do have a 2-post and we have a 4-post that is going to be
Part of the budget.
on it, so it will be operational. The 4-post budget is to replace the 2-post, so that we would have then 2 4-post vehicle lifts.
Okay, well, is it your understanding that has the state represent, there's a reason why these buses have been retired, I assume. The state just doesn't they must be on a schedule, they amortize them and so forth, and they retire them. So what kind of, if they are considered excess equipment by the state, and yes, they're making them available to us at what appears to be an attractive lease, are they prepared, is the state prepared to make sure that these vehicles are roadworthy, that they will be gone through?
They've all been inspected and are tagged till 2023.
For 2023. All right. One other thing I'm going to suggest, and this has to do with the actual budget piece of it in the proposal. I think that it would be helpful if we actually captured all the expenses associated with operating these buses in that section of the budget. So in other words, I would want the insurance put in there. I'd want to make sure that any kind of other expenses associated with operating these buses is included in that section of our budget, the breakout for this plan, for this program.
So none of the other insurance costs are allocated to the specific program. So I'd be concerned about allocating insurance here. And I mean, I think we can track it. We can tell you what it is. I'd be concerned about restructuring the budget because right now, and all of our insurance is together in the budget.
I understand that. I understand that, but
not all of it. I think that is. I think we need to be consistent. However, we're reflecting that.
I can appreciate that. My point, though, for saying this is that I think when I got the electronic version of the handout that's waiting for us to pick up, for me to pick up in my inbox at City Hall, I thought I read something that said that the insurance cost would be around $25,000. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. Well, if that's identified as a cost associated with operating the buses, then I think that should be, for full transparency, it should be included in the budget document that we have for this particular activity.
Why would we pull it out separate than we do all the others?
Because
Right,
you're running
and I
this as a
think it-
Well,
pilot, you
I'm
need to
not saying that
understand
it's correct
what
if we're
the
not doing
cost
it
is
for the
going to be
other.
going on, ongoing.
Wait.
You're right.
I think when you go public and you go to the community to ask for support of this, when you go to the chamber and you say, we'd like your support, you probably do need to reflect what the insurance costs are. So this is actually not $130,000, it's $155,000.
Right.
Yeah. And so, yeah, correct.
And I think we've intended to do that. My concern is if we're going to start, I don't think it's responsible budgeting to put the insurance for this in that departmental budget, but not for the other things like lifeguards, like police, like, I mean, there are a lot of things that we do as a municipality that have direct insurance costs. And those insurance costs, if I hesitate to say we're gonna show some in the departmental budget and some not in the departmental budget without a clear policy on which ones and why, because I think
Correct.
while the goal is transparency, what I think the overall outcome is lack of transparency, because you have it as an itemized cost in this budget, but you don't in this other budget. So it's almost like you're hiding it in some by not being consistent.
And I'm not suggesting that we hide it at all. I'm actually suggesting that we actually break it out for all departments.
So I think
I'm not just
I think that needs to be a decision of council if we're going to entirely change the way we do that.
Okay. If that needs
That's
to
a
be
big
put
deal.
on an agenda, let's put it on the agenda.
Well, here's a way maybe that we don't have to take it and put it on an agenda. Just add a footnote to this. It says insurance costs are reflected in line item number, whatever.
Correct.
And just put it that way. That way you don't have to break it out. It's an aggregate number. I hate to put you, I don't really want to change the way we're doing the budget if we can avoid it. I think but if we put a footnote into a budget saying that, insurance costs are reflected in whatever number line item is, I think we get to it.
And if we're trying to show costs for each department, fuel is another example. We would have to break out
Exactly.
fuel by the departments that use the fuel.
Right.
Sure.
I mean, even as simple as copies, we don't allocate to. So, and I don't know that it needs to be on, say, a council agenda. It can be part of the council discussion.
Right.
But if the desire of council is to entirely change the way the budget is organized and presented, that to me is a larger discussion of council. It's not something we do based on an individual comment at a budget meeting.
Right,
It needs to be a more thorough discussion. And
exactly.
All right, well, let's plan to have that discussion, okay? Let's plan to have it.
so,
I think Lorraine did a very good job in the third paragraph. When you get this, Tim, take a look at it, because she, in the third paragraph, or second paragraph under cost, she breaks down the $25,000 into liability, and umbrella and all that kind of stuff. So it's here. It's just not reflected in there. Anne Marie pulled it up. If you read that paragraph, estimated cost for insurance is, and read how she's broken it down, I think she's done a good job. What needs to be done is there should be a footnote probably added to where it's itemized and just says insurance costs are not reflected in this total.
right, so it could be a footnote that addresses all of these costs that aren't included, because it's the insurance and it's the fuel. I mean,
Right.
both of those things. And like you said, Mayor, she indicates here where that is.
Right.
The fact is that insurance and fuel are real costs. And it seems to me that we need to make sure that our accounting reflects what our costs are, and our budget should reflect that also. So I would encourage that. I don't care if we do it with footnotes, if we need to make a policy decision on how it's reported and recorded. I think we need to make sure that we have a full understanding of what the costs are for any project that we take on, any project.
So,
An existing project, not only new proposed, but even existing projects.
right, so here's your operating budget. And like I said, when I went through the PowerPoint, this is a $2 million budget.
Right.
And these are things that, so I'll give an example. We have all of our legal fees are budgeted here. Some of those legal fees are support of the planning commission. Some of those are support of mayor and city council. By budgeting it in one location, we can still track and tell you where those legal fees are being spent, because within our accounting system, we have the subcategories, but it gets very difficult to anticipate. And I think what happens is, if you have to budget these types of costs in every department, you end up over budgeting the expense to make sure that you cover it. So what we do is we put in a number. This is about what we're going to spend on legal. This is what we expect. But then we can break it out and we can give you much more detail if it's requested, in terms of whether it's, planning commission, mayor and council, administration, any particular piece of litigation, lease extensions. We can break that down. Same with supplies, office supplies and computer equipment. We budget computers in one line, so it's a consistent line every year, but one year it might be for the planner, one year it might be for the maintenance supervisor. But by putting it all in the operating budget, it reduces these large fluctuations and uncertainties in any individual departmental budget.
Anne Marie, speaking specifically of the costs there on that page for legal costs, does that line item include the legal costs the city incurs for the support we provide to the Board of Adjustment?
Board of Adjustment is the only other budget that has legal in it, because they have a separate attorney. So that is,
Okay.
that is budgeted in the Board of Adjustment.
Correct. So, and where do I find that entry on this page for the BOA?
It's not on this page. It is on,
Well,
did you say 12?
page before operating.
Oh,
Right. It comes under that particular
oh, there it is. Right.
organization.
So it's on page 19. So what we've got in here, we've got 5,000.
Okay.
We had budgeted 5,000 for this year, but because of the case that was
Right.
very lengthy, it was much more than that, but we did not expect something like that for the current year.
Right. Well, I guess my question then is that if that line entry on the other page that you had up a minute ago is supposed to represent all of our legal fees, why does that not also include the BOA's legal fees?
This is a different lawyer.
It is a different law firm that we use, and it's specific to the role of the Board of Adjustment. And because the Board of Adjustment by statute is really supposed to be independent from the elected body, because they, hear appeals and variances, we've tracked it separately.
I'll let this rest right now, but I reserve the privilege of coming back to this at a future meeting.
Well, we'll have boards and commission
Yep,
budgets will be discussed at a future meeting.
right.
There's a comment from Bonnie in reference to this, and it says this is the proposed pilot program. It needs to reflect all cost to be properly evaluated. It's silly to co-mix from the pilot with ongoing city operations.
And I think what we're saying is we are tracking all of the expenses, and we will report on the expenses. It's just in terms of where it's shown in the budget document.
Okay.
And I agree, Mayor, that the idea of a footnote can address those
I think that
concerns.
can address it. Yeah.
I mean, even with fuel, we can, through our fuel system, we can report out the total amount of fuel for any vehicle.
Well, you keep track of that. When
Right.
something gets filled, isn't there a
Right.
slip that's turned in that says whatever
It's-
item got?
It's all electronic,
Yeah, okay. So
but yeah, so we'll be able to say how much was the fuel for this. I
right.
mean, we'll know gallons and we'll know what we paid. So yeah, I mean, we can track it all, we can report it all.
Right.
But we're not doing that so far correctly for all the other departments' vehicles. Is that correct?
We
We can.
we can get that information.
Yeah.
I mean, we can get that information and share it upon request. We just don't individually,
Right.
we don't,
See,
we
I
haven't had a
actually,
request for it.
right. Well, when I went through the budget, the document, and by the way, Ellen, Lorraine, and Anne Marie, I really appreciate all the effort. I recognize the effort that was put into preparing this document. I'm very appreciative of that. And I appreciate getting it prior to the meeting so I could be somewhat prepared. Thank you very much. I noticed, for example, and I'm not picking on you, Anne Marie, but I'll just use you as an example. In your budget for the city manager, you of course have a city vehicle that you is part of your benefits package, and there is a line item there for maintenance of the car that you use, but that's I think $200.
Mhm.
And the maintenance, of course, does not include operating costs. It does not include, for example, when it needs new tires. I don't think. It doesn't.
That would be maintenance. If I blew a tire, we would charge that to the maintenance.
Okay. So where are your gasoline purchases accounted for?
They're in the operating under gasoline.
So it's, okay. And so that becomes part of the overall expenditure for the entire city. It's rolled into that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you look at page 20 of the budget under operating, and you go down to about the lower 1/3 of
What's the
page,
line number?
it's
Account number?
100-590, 5336 and 5338.
Yep.
We've got both diesel and gasoline.
Correct.
It's all rolled into one, but there is an actual record of
Yes.
what, yeah. So Bonnie asked another question, which is, when are these tracked costs presented to the public?
And again, if council requests that it be presented, it would be presented. You know, I think or if a member of the public asked.
Right.
And we get FOIA requests related to the budget all the time.
Mhm.
And we're able to provide, you know, the detail because our accounting system maintains it. The question is how many, I mean, and so if council says, and look, as a pilot program for the transit, I think we acknowledge that we are going to do a post-season report that
Right.
will include actual expenses, you know, actual everything, in addition to the feedback that we've received regarding the route, the frequency, and all of those things.
Right.
So, I mean, because this is a pilot program,
That's
the
what it-
whole intent of it is at the end of the season, we do some sort of a report that says,
Evaluate it.
this is what it
Okay,
was.
so
But-
Bonnie goes on
But-
to say, as a member of the public, I'm asking if these costs be presented.
But they are presented.
Right there,
They're in
yes.
they're in the, hold on, go back to it.
They would have just been posted yesterday, right? Yesterday evening?
Right. But
Right.
it's right here,
It's in the paragraph. It's in
linked
the
to the
narrative.
agenda.
Yeah.
It's 130,000 is the operating cost, and that's what you get out of the budget document. And then Ellen Lorraine goes into detail and where you can find it and what lines,
Right.
the insurances and the fuel expense.
Okay, Bonnie's gone a little different direction. She's asking, as when costs of operation are incurred, she'd like to see those costs reflected in what's reported to the public, not as budgeted. So what Ellen Lorraine has put in the report is what's budgeted.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
because we haven't
And
incurred
so
them.
when it's reported back to the public at the
Right.
end of the season or
Right.
at some point incrementally as we go along, that we would report the actual cost of what did the insurance come in at? Did it come in
Well,
at $23,000 or did it come in at 29?
Right.
Well, we would do that. It's a pilot. That's exactly what we would do.
Yeah, so that's fine. Okay. I think we got what I certainly understand the question. I think I understand the question she's asking, or the information she's asking for, and we can get that information. It's just going to have to be, provided.
Right, and again, with a pilot, there's going to be a lot of reporting out that's more than just budgetary. It's
Yes.
going to be qualitative as well. I mean, I think
Yes.
we're going to have to give, we will have to provide a satisfaction, people can submit their satisfaction.
It's gonna be everything from the time to the route to every aspect of it is going to be looked at. That's
you
what
need also-
it is.
You also need to report out, any incidents that occur, if you have.
Right,
Yes, I mean, that's what pilot is.
Can I ask another question, please? May I, about the buses? I appreciate the idea of a bus system. I've been an advocate at different times of my life for greater public transit. So in general, I'm supportive of public transit. Given the fact that we have a community that is that we are trying to encourage people to use alternate forms of transportation to get to and from our beaches, are these buses able to accommodate beach people going to the beach with all the paraphernalia that they typically carry to the beach?
The bus is equipped for handicap, and the back of the bus is also equipped for space to bring on something. Yes,
But they're not equipped.
but
to
not,
carry a bicycle.
go ahead.
They're
What'd
not
you say,
equipped to carry a bike. They're not equipped to carry a bicycle.
Not a
No,
bicycle, no.
we won't
No.
encourage.
Right, but for instance, if somebody wants to ride their bike to the trailhead or to the bike parking lot on Gills Neck Road and then walk over to 1812, you can ride your bike and then get on the bus.
Right.
Once you've secured your bike. So I think.
Okay.
there are
So
options.
Bonnie's taken her request a little further for more of a breakdown, and then she asked that the report on the status and the cost of the pilot should be included in the manager's monthly report.
That's fine.
I think we can do
I mean,
that.
I would expect that we would, just like we report out on, building permits. And I think that, and the financial, we'll have the financial information every month to do the financial report. So we can even provide that, how much we spent, how much of our gas was for transit. We can easily provide that every month.
I think what will even be as interesting is what was the revenue taken in.
Right. Right.
You're only projecting 20,000. It may be that you end up taking in considerably more, or you may take in considerably less.
Right. We tried to be conservative with the revenue because we didn't want to artificially inflate it to something that's not achievable and make the net cost more.
Mhm.
And
What's the,
there's also
what's the
a
capacity?
source of revenue dealing with potential advertising on
Of
the
course,
inside.
Exactly.
haven't
Right,
even-
if we want to go that route, if we want to go that route. What is the capacity of the buses? How many passengers can one bus carry?
12 seated and then up to 3. It's 3, right?
I think
Ellen?
two
Two
handicap.
handicaps.
Yeah, we have two
Handicaps.
handicaps. Two handicaps.
And how many
So 14
non-handicap?
altogether,
14.
14, thank you, I didn't
including
hear.
two handicap
Apologize.
spaces.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then
I,
what's the plan around, will this be on an agenda for council to approve prior to the budget being adopted, or what's the
So-
sequence on that?
The draft agenda for the 14th is being sent to you all this morning. I do need to add the professional services. So that draft budget includes the authorization to sign the lease. We can expand it to, I mean, if we're going to lease these vehicles, we do need to get the lease signed. We need to get the vehicles in our possession so we can ready them. So we can expand that item to, do full authorization of the program.
That's our regular meeting, right?
Yeah.
It's on the agenda,
Okay.
the draft agenda.
Okay.
And Ellen Lorraine, you said that the information about the Lewis line is already posted on the city's website?
It's not on the website, it's on the agenda, but we can add it to the website.
Yeah, you might want to go ahead and put the footnote, just amend this, put the footnote in that we were talking about. Okay,
For those of you who weren't at the live Q&A associated with the beach parking, we did get a lot of questions or suggestions through that process that we implement a shuttle program. And any of you who have been involved in any of the parking discussions over the many years have heard this kind of probably ad nauseum.
Mhm.
that we need
Correct.
something like this. And
I think part of
frankly, I
that, though,
think
Emery,
we saw,
is like a
pardon?
residential shuttle. I think what part of that desire is not just for visitors to come in and have a shuttle system, but I think people also envision
Mm-hmm.
getting picked up in Pilot Town Village and being driven down to the beach or driven downtown. You know, I think, and that's not an unreasonable expectation if we're talking about
Right.
spending
Not at all.
city money on a shuttle system, frankly.
Right.
That comment was made to me, Andrew, when I was at the library in terms of using it, people in town using it to get to the library. So yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, so I get that point. So there are several things we know about transit. One is the frequency of the shuttle needs to be enough that it needs to be at least 15 minutes. Once you space it out. So the larger that route is, you have
Longer it takes.
The longer
two
it takes.
factors. You can either increase the number of buses, increase the number of drivers, significantly increase the cost,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't get the riders because people aren't going to wait, 35
Right.
minutes.
Right.
So again,
Right.
part of it is, with this being a pilot, is to see how it works, what works well, what doesn't, and doing it at a cost and everything in a scale that's manageable. If the biggest comment we get is that we need more stops, one, with the buses we're leasing, we could perhaps look somewhere during the season of adding a third bus. Or we could say, okay, next year we're going to expand it and add these locations. I don't think it's realistic to say that we could say go, even if we expand it throughout Pilot Town Village, you might be able to add a stop on 4th Street so that people from Pilot Town Village could walk there. But I think that
I was just using that neighborhood as
right,
an
no, but I
example.
think
Yeah,
I think that's legit. I think
Mhm.
the concern is that we need to start with something manageable that
Right.
has enough frequency that it, we're not spread too thin and destined for failure just by, trying to do too much too quickly.
Well, that's the beauty of getting a sense of these stops. We'll know immediately whether even anybody's getting on at those stops. So
I have a question or two. Khalil, Carolyn, do you all foresee the need for signs to be placed at the bus stops so that they'd be designated as the Lewis, what did you call it, Lewis Line bus stop?
Line.
yeah, we're
Bus
looking
line.
at, yeah,
Is that
that's,
what you
And it
think?
stops, yeah.
yeah, we're working on that as well.
Okay, and the other thing I want to bring to your attention, I don't know if this has been shared with you before, but I guess I've been around Lewis long enough and attended enough city meetings for over a span of time to have sat through several presentations that were made by a company. If I remember correctly, I want to say the company name was Jolly Trolley or something like that. And they were a vendor who has a local presence, and they were, I can't describe how they came to make a presentation. I don't know if they were asked to make a presentation
Yes,
or
They were
is that how it
invited.
was?
they were invited.
Anyway, there was not the decision made at the time was that the city would not make a commitment for that expense, as I recall. Is that a fair statement, Ted?
Yeah, I mean, they wanted us to buy the bus, and it was a large bus. It was like a 35-seat bus. And we were looking at about $250,000 worth of expenditure to get into the operation, and we would still have to man it.
Right,
Right.
and that, so.
Right, but
and
that's a matter of, that's the tail wagging the dog. That was the vendor's proposal for a bus to meet the demands that they were projecting. If we if we develop an RFP and we go to a vendor and we say, we don't want the 35-seat bus, but we want a such and such size bus, prepare a proposal accordingly.
How would something be better than $1?
Tim, I can tell you, I approached one of Jolly Trolley's current competitors with this idea, and the conversation lasted about 3 minutes,
Right.
because it's just not profitable.
Mhm.
If we were going to potentially outsource this to someone like Jolly Trolley or another competitor, I mean, they immediately just shut it down, and because they just realized there was no way they would be able to make the profit they need to make in order to operate. So I think the process we're moving forward with, particularly since we have this terrific deal with DelDOT and DART, I think, $130,000, budgeted right now is very, very reasonable, considering what potentially the other costs could be.
Actually, Khalil, I had forgotten you did talk to the people when we first started this project. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I had in your process that you have followed, did you all have the benefit of talking to any transportation design expert who actually designs bus routes? Did you have the benefit of that kind of expertise?
We met with the transit planners at Delaware Transit Corporation more than once.
Mhm.
And what your proposal reflects their advice, is that correct?
Our proposal incorporates the discussions we had with them as to, again, just some of the basic transit. If you don't have frequent enough service, people won't use it. We did not propose any stops on DelDOT roads, because that adds another level of complexity to it. So yes, we incorporated the feedback that we got from them through.
And from Bethany, who's been doing this for
you're right,
since
absolutely.
2005. So we
Yeah.
And I also consulted with the city of Newark, who runs the transit program, and they're actually they are taking some. They're also leasing some of the DART retired buses, and they have run a transit system for 30 years, and they felt very comfortable taking on the DART buses. I mean, they're just starting to take them on, but they were very comfortable with them.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to raise one concern, and it's open for discussion, please. I know that you have the 1812 parking lot as a designated bus stop, and I would just encourage you to consider how congested that parking lot is with just vehicles. And when cars and large trucks or cars are trying to exit that parking lot onto Front Street, it can create a backup on the parking lot. In other words, other cars can't get past the large vehicle, and turning out onto Front Street takes a lot of, you need a big turning radius to be able to accomplish that correctly and safely. So I just want to offer that anecdotal advice or suggestion.
Thank you. We'll look into that, as we will.
Thank you.
The rest of them.
Thank you.
I think if you could get a hold of one of these buses and drive the route.
Well, we're thinking of doing that.
They're smaller than our
they're
some of
not
our
a big
trash-
bus.
our trash trucks navigating there.
They're not a big bus, thank goodness. They're not a big
Yeah,
bus.
they're like a big van.
Yes, and they're
Right.
And they're right. Mhm.
And if you do that trial, as Ted suggested, what I would encourage you to do is actually place cars along the curb line opposite 1812, put cars there, put cars at the end of the exit lane of the parking lot. So it's a real life test, and see how easy it is to maneuver out of that parking lot.
You got it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, anything else?
Okay.
Okay. Well, Carol and Khalil, thank you very much. I think this is a well thought out program. But I think there are some questions, as obviously we've had a long discussion here, almost an hour. And it's going to need fine tuning as we get in it, assuming we go forward with it. So to be considered, I think, is where we are right now.
Expected.
But I do think the fact that Bethany has had a system with DART for over 10 years.
They actually don't use DART. They actually purchase trolleys.
Did they actually purchase trolleys? Okay.
Yeah, so they purchase, and again, that's something that we may decide to do at a future date.
Mhm.
But with vehicle purchase having for many years been a barrier to entry, whether it's because a third party vendor is going to require we buy the vehicles because they just don't have them to spare, or whether we were to purchase them in-house. That has truly been the barrier to trying something out. So this gives us an opportunity to offer the service for a season, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then build on it in the future. If we determine in the future that we want to do this, expand the route, whatever. And maybe at some point we determine that these DART buses aren't, they're too small, or they're not, for some reason, they're not practical. Then you can start to budget for purchasing the buses, but with the knowledge of having run a program under your belt first. So you're
Exactly.
not starting off with a, $500,000 in bus purchases before you even try it.
Right.
Pilot.
Okay. It's been a very good discussion. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to bring up here this morning? Okay, well, I think we have had a busy morning here, almost 2 hours of it. And thanks for the overview of the budget, Lorraine and Anne Marie. And I think the Lewis line discussion has been very beneficial for all of us as we try to better understand the potential that this offers.
Emery, can you remind which parts of the budget will go into depth next week?
That's why.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of go to that. Okay, hold on. Let's see. So a couple of things. Well, I'll start with answering that. So next week is our general department budgets, maintenance, parks and marina, planning, building, finance, city manager's office, and lifeguards.
Thank
So
you.
that's the focus next week. What I would say though is, as you start really kind of digesting the budget document, and I can send the PowerPoint out to you if that helps you to navigate.
That would be
I will
helpful.
make the
Yes.
correction where I think I had an increase where it was a decrease, or vice versa.
Mhm.
I'll send that out to you. If, as you start navigating through the budget, if you have specific things you'd like more detail on, questions about something, if you want to start filtering them to myself and or Ellen Lorraine, that gives us, typically what we do between the budget meetings is we try to have the information that you need to answer questions you might have, regardless of, so all of these meetings, we're talking about presentation and review of the draft budget. So we are including these specific departments, but typically, like next week, we may have changes that come out
Sure.
based on the discussion. We're going to give you that revision in the next week, along with kind of the key of
Right.
what's changed and why.
Right.
So if there are things that come up in this, week in between, the more you can get to us in terms of questions, the more we're able to provide the answers when we
Sure.
get to those meetings.
Thank you. I have a question, Anne Marie, regarding the notice that you'll be posting to the city calendar for next week's budget meeting, which is a week from today, right?
Mhm.
Will you provide that break? You'll identify the different departments that will be on discussed. Is that
Yes,
correct?
it's already up there
Yeah.
for all of the meetings.
Right, but it's spelled out which departments are going to be discussed next week, right?
Yep.
Just want to
Yep.
make, yeah. Good, thank
And
you.
it looks like Kayla has also already changed the agenda to reflect that starting next week, we'll be meeting in City Hall with the Zoom option.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we have executive session that will start when you all get here. So if we want to plan to just get, do we want to start that at 11:30 to give everybody a little bit of time?
Yes, I would appreciate it.
At least 11:30.
Right.
Okay,
Is that enough time, or do you need?
All right.
more? You want 45 minutes? Half hour enough or?
11:30 is fine.
Okay,
11:30 is fine with me, Ted.
okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay,
all right.
anything else to bring forward? How about a meeting how about a motion to adjourn?
How about recess, because you're going into
recess, of course.
executive
Oh,
session.
okay.
Okay.
So you can do your motion to recess and go into executive session to
Right,
begin at 11:30 is
Okay.
what maybe the motion should be.
yes,
Okay,
okay,
motion to recess until 11:30.
okay. Is
I'll
there-
second.
Thanks, Tim. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you all very much. We'll see you in half an hour.